This is Joe Delio from the Live Community bringing you a GlobalProtect reporting and security assurance webinar brought to you by David Cumbow, Ron Hermoko, Derek Bergman, and Aaron McAllister. Now I hand it off to David and the rest for this wonderful webinar.
All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us today to talk about GlobalProtect reporting as well as security assurance that's offered as part of your premium and platinum support package. My name is David Cumbow. I'm going to be hosting you today alongside Ron Remoko, Derek Bergman, and Aaron McAllister. We're going to be all splitting up the webinar and providing you the information that we're going to be talking about today. For those of you that have joined us before, thank you so much. Welcome back. For those of you that are new to this webinar series that we've been doing, welcome. We do have a few other webinars, which we have a slide on here shortly, which we'll talk about. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Use the Q&A functionality at the bottom of the section, or at the bottom of the Zoom screen. The chat functionality has been disabled just so we can keep track of those questions, but feel free to ask those questions in that Q&A section. Next slide, please. So what we're going to be talking about today is just some lessons learned so far, not necessarily around GlobalProtect, but just in general, right? This is definitely a little bit of a unique situation for all of us. So some lessons learned, hopefully provide a little bit of humor to it as well. And then we'll hop into Derek and Ron's section, where we'll talk about reporting for remote users. And then I'll wrap it up with the Palo Alto Network Security Assurance section. Next slide, please. So if you have joined our previous webinars, here's a link to those webinars. One of them actually does have the live community blog post completed. The other one is just up on YouTube currently, but the live community blog post is being created. They're both going to end up having live community blog posts, which is going to list out the Q&A section as well. It just takes a little bit of time to transcribe those Q&As. As well as this one is being recorded as you heard it as we started the webinar. This webinar is being recorded. It will be up on YouTube first, followed by being up on the live community here in about 2 weeks. So it should make it onto the YouTube channel sometime next week. We should be able to cut it and edit it and get it up on there sometime next week, the team that does that. And anyways, all of those can be found on the live community, the Palo Alto Networks live community YouTube channel, or eventually on live.paloaltonetworks.com. Next slide, please. So as we start talking about lessons learned, you know, some of these are going to be pretty trivial and they definitely make sense. And hopefully it's something that were just best practices that we were doing if we had any remote work that we were doing in general anyways. Maybe we worked, 410s or we worked typical 40-hour weeks, but one of the days we worked from home. But there's definitely some things I think when we are now focusing on a heavily work from home environment that are some lessons learned that we could talk about, right? And the first one being just having set work hours. It's really easy to walk into your office or wherever you're working from at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and then all of a sudden at 6 or 7 o'clock at night, you've been working for 12 hours straight and don't realize that you've missed lunch or whatever the case may be. So definitely, take care of yourself and make sure that you have those set working hours. Also, in the case of an emergency, such as your internet goes down or your cell phone goes out, know who to contact. You might not have that resource available that you would normally have to reach out to those entities. So, I have a few coworkers that live out and they don't have great cell coverage. So they're heavily reliant on their ISP, but now they're even more reliant because it's required by their jobs. So, just definitely knowing who to contact when the ISP goes down or things on that line is great to know. Also get out of the house when you can, right? So feel free to share those shopping duties with your significant other or get out and go for a walk or whatever the case may be. I do have a kind of south facing room here. So my blind is closed for most of the day just to keep the temperature down, especially now it's getting a little bit warmer here in Southern California. But it also can be a little bit of a trick on the mind because the lighting is relatively consistent throughout the day. So getting out and getting some sunlight definitely can help you, I think, for that mental health as well. If you do have an environment where you have those kind of constrained bandwidth limitations or you have some bandwidth limitations, work on those bandwidth sharing hours, right? Be it with your significant other or if you have college level kids, or even if you don't have college level kids and you tell them they can play their video games after they finish their work, right? Be sure that you are keeping in mind the bandwidth limitations you may have. So I think most of us probably have plenty of bandwidth, but there is also some instances, again, some of my coworkers that are live at a little bit more remote locations, they do have limitations on that bandwidth, and that's definitely something to keep in mind. If you have some free time, take up a new hobby, or in my case, I do a lot more honeydews now. So backyard is finally getting worked on after many, many years. I have no excuses of going out and playing, or going to restaurants or things along that line to get in the way. So, go out and work in the backyard for 30 minutes to an hour every day and try to get that taken care of. And then, last but not least, definitely remember that we're all in this together, right? So be it if you're on the Palo Alto Network side, or if you are a customer, or if you're a vendor that's joining us today, we're all in this together, and we're all facing a lot of the same struggles. So definitely, good to keep in mind as we're all going through and communicating and helping each other out too. That's the collaboration that I've seen with everything going on has been great as well. Next slide, please. But, ultimately I did have to bring a little bit of humor to it. And by far, this is not the definitive list of COVID-19 related memes, but I also chose the ones that I think were the most appropriate as well for kind of what we're talking about. And, Derek, for example, one of the engineers that's going to be speaking today, he has 2 young kids at home, and it's funny that you hear them chime in every once in a while. Or my counterpart, Avery Freeland, he gets his kids chime in every once in a while. You can hear them in the background. Or, maybe doing your hair or shaving is not as much of a necessity as it once was, and those mute buttons and the video enable buttons might be right next to each other, so you get that accidentally, not so flattering picture as you turn the webcam on. Or finally, if you have animals, unfortunately I don't, but from my coworkers that do have animals that we talk to, it seems that their dogs absolutely love it that they're home all the time. And I think the cats despise it a little bit, right? So if you have animals, you could probably chime in a little bit and relate there. So with that being said, I am going to go ahead and hand it over to the actual what you came here for today. And I'm going to hand it over to Derek and Ron, and they're going to be talking to you about the reporting for remote users. So with that being said, Derek and Ron, it's all yours.
Thanks, Dave. This is Ron Romoko, and thanks everyone for joining today for a Thursday service. Derek and I are going to talk about some reporting. I'm going to do a little bit in terms of the tips for the reporting, which you can do on the firewall, and Derek is going to get into a little bit more detail on the tricks. So you get some tips and tricks today. And I guarantee you my section is meme free. So I think you've seen the end of the memes, but let's go ahead with the next slide. So most of you hopefully have seen the firewall, familiar with the UI. There's a series of tabs across the top. And in terms of GlobalProtect, remote access users, there's a way we can isolate that that's pretty easy in terms of what you see is the monitor tab in dark blue at the top there. We do a lot with logs at Palo Alto Networks, and you can see all the different log types on the left. And within the traffic log, you just click on monitor and then the traffic log, and all this traffic information comes up. Something you could do pretty easy in the red box there is just find your GlobalProtect zone. And that's the zone that you're terminating the tunnels for the remote access users that are coming into the firewall, and then click on that zone. In this case, it's AWS VP, and that will populate the query bar at the top. You can see the other smaller red box. So in this case, the source zone would be equal to the value of AWS VPN. It might be something different in your installation, but a real quick way to just tell the firewall, I only want to see traffic coming from the source zone where the GlobalProtect tunnel has been terminated. And on the bottom, there's just a couple of quick notes there. We went through this on the previous webinars that had GlobalProtect best practices. It is a best practice to terminate those GlobalProtect connections in a GlobalProtect zone, as opposed to maybe your trusted zone, to be able to apply additional policy when those users connect into the GlobalProtect, and then apply policy to what they can access into a trust zone. So that encompasses a GlobalProtect tunnel zone and also additional IP pools. So real simple way, within the monitor tab, you can kind of see the traffic coming from your VPN zone. And in the upper right, you'll see there's a green icon that says PanOS 8.1 Plus. That means that this is a feature that's supported, going way back to What most of our customers are on now, either 8.0, 8.1, or 9.0. The current Pan OS version is 9.1. 9.1.2 is current, but it's not a preferred release yet. So we'll talk about some of the new features that are available in 9.1. But this is a traditional next generation firewall monitor capability. It's built into everything. So you can do this with monitor tabs. So next slide. So if you take the same monitor logs and you look on the left-hand side, instead of traffic in the red box, we've introduced something new called the GlobalProtect logs. And this is a consolidation of the GlobalProtect log category. And it gives you all of the activity around your GlobalProtect connections in one space. The difference here with this, if you look again in the upper right, this is with Pan OS 9.1. So this is a new feature. So if you're running 8.1, if you're running 9.0.6 or .7, which I think is the preferred release from our TAC, this functionality is not in there. You'll still get the monitor logs, but you won't get a GlobalProtect consolidated log, but you can see there's lots of great information in terms of the portal and gateway information, host user, the actual authentication method. So this is a great place that you can begin your troubleshooting for any of the GlobalProtect connections. Next slide. So something else you can do in terms of what's built into the firewall is you can roll your own ACC tab. So you can see across the top there, we've got a bunch of different tabs. We were just in monitor. If you go to ACC, the Application Control Center, there's several different tabs in terms of network activity. If you've worked with our firewall, you understand kind of how ACC works. And in the red box in the center, there's a plus sign. You can actually roll your own ACC tab. In this case, I've created something called GP View, which in this case will bring up a series of widgets that you can select. Here I've got GlobalProtect host information where you can see 2 endpoints and the number of host information profile objects each one of those endpoints is using. And then on the right is the application usage for those 2 hosts. So you can really dig into detail in terms of how many applications the GlobalProtect users are accessing and then what categories they fall into. Same way you would just with regular network activity on ACC, but in this case, we've created our own GlobalProtect view. And again, in the upper right, you can see this is a classic feature with 8.1 moving forward. But next slide, you can see we've changed that in the upper right. We've got 9.1. We thought that was a pretty good idea in terms of rolling your own ACC tabs. So the engineers at Palo Alto Networks have created a factory installed GlobalProtect activity tab, which goes into a lot more detail and plays off of the logs that we talked about in a couple slides ago. So within 9.1, this will show up when you upgrade to 9.1 GlobalProtect activity, and you've got some built-in widgets that includes a 3 new widgets, which are the successful connections from GlobalProtect, which is on the left here. And you can see on the right, unsuccessful connection attempts, which can be really helpful in terms of troubleshooting. It'll give you error reasons and source users, IP addresses. And then what you don't see here, there's one more widget underneath on the bottom, which has to do with the operational aspects and deployment activity, where you can dig into the operating systems for the users that are connecting, in addition to authentication method and a couple other things too. So this is really great once you get up to 9.1. Again, 9.1 is not a preferred release. You can run 9.1 today, you can download it, but it does not have the stability that 9.0, the other releases in the 8 train have currently. We anticipate that to go preferred and general release within a month or 2 now. So we like this a lot. So next slide. So then in terms of operationalizing these reports, you can look at the logs, you can create your ACC tabs. Let's say you want to just get an email every day of the VPN reports with certain attributes in there. There's a lot of embedded linking within the Palo Alto firewall configuration. And here's a simple way you can generate a VPN report on a daily basis. And I've kind of outlined things with pointers in red. The first thing you want to do is create an email server profile. What you're doing is introducing the firewall to the email server, making sure that they can talk to each other, and then you provide information about the email server and the IP address. You save that, and then you go into monitor and report groups. You create a report group in which you define what you want that report to include, the attributes and the values and the columns and how it's going to look, and you add that and save it. And then thirdly, once steps 1 and 2 are done, you come into the email scheduler, which is the graphic pop-up window you see here. So the email schedule, you give it a name, it could be any name, in this case it's VPN Daily. And then you reference the previous 2 profiles you just created, which is the VPN report group, and then the email profile for VPN. And then the one more drag down you've got there is the recurrence, which in this case is a daily. You could do weekly or monthly reports. And we give you the option to send a test email on the bottom left here. So you should try this and create some reports, send them off to email, see what they look like. You can do this. You won't break anything on the firewall. So this is pretty easy to do. And then once you get comfortable with it, you can tweak it and add additional report groups and different profiles and have a couple different automated schedule reports. So this isn't new in 9.1. It's green up in the upper right. So this is 8.1, a classic feature. And it just kind of skims the surface of what we can do with reports. So with that, those are just some kind of basic tips. I'm going to hand it over to Derek, who is going to get into some more technical detail on some of the tricks we can do with some of the reporting for GlobalProtect.
Thanks, Ron. So I've received just quite a few questions lately regarding GlobalProtect, active users, reporting, logins, logouts, that kind of thing. And the main problem is trying to operationalize something regarding the information that's already available for you. Meaning, how do I get that information at my fingertips without having to go in and search for it? So prior to PanOS 9.1, you can look at the active users under the network tab, select the GlobalProtect gateway that you have set up, and then you can see the current or previous users using the link that's provided there. But this is something that you would have to manually check. I mean, you could also create a filter under the monitor tab, similar to what Ron was showing there, or a widget under the ACC tab. But again, this is something you would have to manually check. We want something that's operationalized. In this example, I'll show you how to go through and set up a report for GlobalProtect, log on, log off using the user ID logs. So if you're not familiar with user ID, it just allows you to identify users and enforce those granular security policies based on mapping the IPs to usernames. So user ID provides several different methods for mapping those IP addresses to usernames, including server monitoring. We have the XML API, syslog, but we're interested in GlobalProtect because if you're using GlobalProtect currently, the agent also acts as a user ID agent. So if you look at the example screenshot here, we're using a filter on the monitor tab under the user ID logs to look for the log on, log out events with the data source type equal to GlobalProtect and the user not equal to pre-log on. And we want to exclude the pre-log on because the purpose of pre-log on is to authenticate the endpoint, not the user, which then enables you to use things like domain scripts or other tasks to run as soon as that device is powered on. The filter is down the bottom for your reference, but here we want to find those logon events that are sourced from the GlobalProtect agent, which means the user authenticated to the VPN. And this is important because not only is the GlobalProtect agent accurately identifying the user, but you do not have to use the system logs to filter out GlobalProtect events, which again is something you cannot easily operationalize. So if you notice in the top right corner, you'll see the PanOS 8.1 label there, which means this helps for customers that are not on 9.1 and taking advantage of the enhancements with regards to logging and reporting of GlobalProtect in the newer versions. So everything that Ron showed, it had the 9.1 in there. I also want to point out that if you wanted to filter these GlobalProtect user ID logs further, there's not a method to do it by zone or gateway with the user ID logs, but you can easily add or filter out the IP ranges for external gateway IP pools. This way you can run separate reports for, say for internal or external gateway authentications if you have multiple gateways set up. So a nice ability there. So the nice thing about filtering on user ID instead of the system logs is being able to operationalize this information. So under the monitor tab, if you select manage custom reports, You can click Add to add your own custom report. And we can use the same filter we used in the previous slide to build out our new report. So I gave it a name and selected the Panorama user ID log database as the source for the report. But if you do not have Panorama, you could use the device level user ID log, and the same filter will work for you. You can select the columns on the right-hand side to match your requirements, what you'd like to see in the report. The time frame here in the screenshot has 7 days, but you can easily change that to look at the last 24 hours and then set up a daily report if you prefer that. So here's the custom report that's generated as a result of the previous slide's report settings and the query that we used. As you can see here, we're looking at all the login and logout events under the event type that came from the GlobalProtect agent on the device of the user that's listed here. So if you remember from our filter, we're excluding those pre-logon events or those device logon events. So we only capture the users authenticating to the VPN. Use this with Ron's previous slide on operationalizing reports. And now you have a daily VPN report that can be sent out to you via email and not have to log into the firewall or manually check the logs. So now you have a great report or a report group built out, and you want to use it on another firewall. Or maybe you want to share your report with a peer or use a peer's report in your own firewall. With these 4 easy steps, I'll kind of walk through how to export an existing report template and then import that template into another firewall. It's important because now you can start collaborating and increase your efficiency by not having to manually recreate the report through the web GUI. So let's walk through those steps here. So the step 1 is creating the report. This screenshot is should be familiar because we already built out this report in that previous slide. But the first step is to create that report by configuring the report settings and using the query similar to the query that we used in that previous slide. Then simply commit the configuration change. The next step is exporting the set commands. So now you're going to open a CLI session with the firewall or Panorama device where the report was created in that first step. And you want to change the CLI output format so that you can copy the CLI commands used to create that report. So using the set CLI config output format in that first screenshot, notice how there are a few options with regards to the output format. For example, you can format the CLI output into JSON to be easily readable and then parsable by machines. We're going to use these set commands in this example to easily collect that configuration, or even if we wanted to reconfigure another device or a fresh device for that matter. So we're going to set the output format to set because we want to export the config and maybe share this report with our friends because we're all about collaboration here at Palo Alto Networks. Next, we're going to type configure to enter the configuration mode, which then allows you to view or modify the configuration. So you'll type show shared reports after that, press enter. And what this will do is list out the reports for a single vSys firewall. But if you have multiple virtual systems on a firewall, you can type show vSys and then the vSys name and then reports, and it will actually show you only those reports for that specific virtual system. You could also type out show and it'll output the entire configuration of the firewall. Or show interfaces for that matter, and it'll give you an output with the set commands for those configurations. I also want to make a note here of 2 commands that might come in handy on the right-hand side of the slide there. The first one is set CLI pager off, which turns off that default paging output of 50 lines a page and then outputs the entire configuration so you can easily grab the output. The second command is the set CLI scripting mode on. Which helps if you have more than 20 lines that you're copying and pasting into the CLI. So if you notice that the CLI truncates or generates errors, for example, you can either paste a smaller section of the commands or simply turn this mode on. But both of these commands can be reverted or turned off by just switching that last word of the command to on or off. So now that you have the output from the show reports output, simply copy those set commands and then paste them in a text file for your future use. So step 3, now that you have those output and those set commands from the firewall or Panorama where the report was created, you should just simply open a CLI session on another firewall that does not have the report. Then you enter the configuration mode and then paste the set commands to configure the firewall. Now you can navigate to the Firewall or Panorama web GUI, to the Monitor tab, and then to the Manage Custom Report section to verify that the report is there and functional. So this is the last step here. Once verified, you simply commit the configuration changes. So I provided the CLI set commands for your reference if you want to copy and paste this into the CLI configuration mode of your firewall to create this example report. This slide is showing the set commands for Panorama and is using the Panorama user ID database, as you can tell on the right, the first line there on the right-hand side. I also provided the CLI set commands for those that do not have Panorama and want to configure this report on their firewall. From here, you can use Ron's slide on operationalizing the report, and then create a daily email that goes out to those that need this information. So as a recap, we looked at creating a filter to identify login and log off events for GlobalProtect using that user ID logs versus using the typical system logs. We created a custom report with the same filter used for the user ID logs, and when combined with that slide from Ron on operationalizing, we now have the information via email without having to log into the firewall and manually check the logs. Then we looked at those 4 easy steps to export and import the report template into another firewall, or collaborate with your peers to share the report. But the four steps are just including that, or creating that report, opening a CLI session, changing the CLI output to set commands, and then copy and pasting those set commands into another firewall or Panorama device. And with that, I'll pass it over to Dave for the security assurance section.
Perfect. Thanks, Derek and Ron. Greatly appreciate the information. There are a few great questions that are coming in. We are going to save those for the end of my section here. I probably have about maybe 5 to 10 minutes worth of content, and then we'll hop right into the Q&A. And I'd rather answer those live than type the answer. But I just wanted to also touch on a few things. As you know, we recommended PanOS 8.1 or above, as well as we called out some of the new features in PanOS 9.1. The reason we called out PanOS 8.1 or above, just for everybody's kind of reminder here, is PanOS 8.0 is end of support as of October of 2019, so October of last year. So we should definitely be off of PanOS 8.0. However, PanOS 7.1 was supposed to be end of support at the end of March. That was extended through the end of April, and now has been extended even more through the end of June. So if you do have firewalls that are running PanOS 7.1, please do consider getting those up to PanOS 8.1 or 9.0 for proper support. So there's just kind of a little note I'd like to call out there in regards to why we call out 8.1 or above. All right, Derek, next slide, please. So some of you may or may not be familiar with Palo Alto Network Security Assurance. So in a nutshell, we'll go over what security assurance is, what the prerequisites are for it, and then some of the requirements, a little bit deeper dive into some of those requirements. So Palo Alto Network Security Assurance is essentially if you have an event on your network, be it you detect some type of suspicious activity or you have a known breach, you could reach out to Palo Alto Networks and we'll provide you with some of our own experts in regards to diving a little bit deeper into those IOCs that you may see, be able to help you identify where that lateral movement may have happened, and ultimately come down to a more prevention first approach in regards to why did this happen and how can we prevent it from happening again, right? And we'll also have next step recommendations that can be provided to a proper IR firm, excuse me, such as Verizon, that will be able to dive deeper across all the systems across your network. But next slide, please. One of the nice things about security assurance is it's included as part of your premium and platinum support contract. So if you have premium support, which most everybody does, on your next generation firewall, this is included as part of that. There are a few additional prereqs, but we do have some room for I guess we can not necessarily have to apply all of these prereqs depending on your business needs, right? So first and foremost is we do need to have a best practice assessment ran regularly for your account. So the best practice assessment essentially goes through and it looks at all the settings across your firewall and identifies are they configured to the best practices or not. The ones we actually care about in regards to qualifying for security assurance is specifically around having industry average or above adoption for wildfire, antivirus, anti-spyware, DNS syncing, URL filtering, vulnerability protection, and for logging. You might have specific areas where you can't meet these adoption requirements. Let's say you don't use this for URL filtering, for example. Those are, on a case-by-case basis. We'll work. Please work with your Palo Alto Networks account team, and we'll definitely discuss whether those can be foregone or not. So, next slide, please. So you may be asking yourself why the BPA requirement. Pretty straightforward in regards to why. We want to make sure that the firewalls that you have purchased and invested your time in implementing are configured and up and running in the best possible way, with security posture first type mindset, right? And that prevention first mindset as well. So ultimately the BPA helps you reduce your attack surface. Instead of having a big layer 4, wide open policy for all port 80 and port 443 traffic that you may have transferred over from your legacy firewall, how do we go through and clean that up and get better app ID or vulnerability or wildfire or anti-spyware protection on that specific rule? It also helps you map back to compliance. So if you're utilizing certain security frameworks like NIST or the CIS Critical Security Control 20 framework, then you can map directly back to those and make sure that you have those set up accordingly. Also, again, it's just plain and simple. It's best practice configuration, right? Configuring a next generation firewall like Palo Alto Networks is a lot different than just configuring a legacy layer 4 firewall. So helping you, as well as maybe if you're not the only person in there that is monitoring or manipulating your firewalls, making sure that everybody is applying and adhering to those best practices. And then finally, making sure you understand the features that you've paid for, right? You've paid for these features, you definitely want to adopt them and get them put in place. And you definitely want to make sure that you have a way of understanding where stuff is turned on and where stuff isn't. And the BPA is a great document to help you understand that feature adoption. Next slide, please. And there's a few different ways that we measure your adoption, right? So first and foremost is just overall looking at the adoption of your firewall compared to the industry average. And this is what we were mentioning earlier in regards to the prerequisites. So if you look on the left-hand side, you can see that wildfire, antivirus, anti-spyware, and vulnerability protection are definitely well above the high technology average, which is the industry average in the example of this BPA report here. But you see that DNS syncing and URL filtering could use some work, right? And of course, you're not going to apply URL filtering to every policy, for example. You might have some internal east-west policies that don't require URL filtering. That's why we said, please work with your Palo Alto Networks account team, and we can identify if there's certain areas where you're not going to meet those business or those requirements due to business needs. Next slide, please. But we also show you your adoption over time as well. So as you can see here, the report that was ran on November 29th of 2019, November 29th of 2018, excuse me, had lower adoption rates than the one that was run on September 17th of 2019. But you'll also see that we do map those back to the technology averages, or excuse me, to your industry averages as well. So being able to have that historical understanding of, cool, I'm trending in the right direction, or if multiple people are working in the firewall and somebody is not building out best practices, this is usually a quick and easy way to see, like, hey, my rule count went up, but my adoption went down. So what, who maybe made changes that are not directly utilizing these best practices. And it is a drill down report too, so you can actually drill down into your security policies and see which security policies are configured without some best practices enabled on them. Next slide, please. So finally here, so you've gone through all the prereqs, you have premium or platinum support, you're running a BPA regularly, and you're making sure that you're above that best practice, the adoption rate. So how do you engage security assurance? First and foremost, we hope you don't ever have to engage security assurance. It usually means that something suspicious is going on in your environment. But if you do have to engage security assurance, the data on the left-hand side is ideally what we would like to be collected, right? And this helps any incident response firm dive a little bit deeper into exactly what's going on. So anything in regards to how you expected the attack to come through, what are the timelines on it, any IPs or users or computer names, that you could provide. If you have a topology of the traffic flow to help us understand what type of network devices this is flowing through or what other firewalls it may be flowing through, that would be beneficial. What are the actual indicators of compromise that you've identified so far? And then, of course, off the next generation firewall itself, any tech support file, as well as any relevant logs. So, traffic URL, data filtering, threat, wildfire logs. We definitely want user ID logs if you suspect that there was lateral movement. So some, threat actor logged into your environment under one user and then escalated to a different user that might have more rights within your environment and then moved further laterally from there. Either way, once you collect that data or collect as much of it as possible, go to support.paloaltonetworks.com. When you create a new case, create a case under the type of threat, and then provide all that collected data that you were able to gather, and also any other context that you possibly can. Once you submit it, please contact your SE. We do get notified when you create cases, but please definitely reach out and say, hey, this is serious. We have something going on here. And just, rest assured that we are here to help. And I've gone through these with a few of my customers. Some of my customers have had Palo Alto Networks next generation firewalls that were poorly configured and had a big gaping hole that they've gotten past. And some of them didn't even have Palo Alto Networks next generation firewalls. And we actually got these firewalls put in tap mode and helped out in that regards, things on that line. But either way, when you, if you want to read up a little bit more on security assurance, you'll notice at the bottom of all the slides that I've talked about, there is the link to the best practices for those, for that security assurance. So next slide, please. And let's go ahead and hop into some Q&A here. So first one here, is there a section of the community that shares reports, and are there any concerns about importing a report from the web? I.e., is there a way to confirm the script provided does not contain malicious code? So my recommendation always would be make sure that you are utilizing those set commands and read through whatever you're importing in that regards. But if you are going through and importing a set command that is, set shared reports and then the report name and then the setting after it, the worst you're going to do is just create a report that might not be useful to you. There's no vulnerabilities in applying the set commands for shared reports. Now, if one of the set commands was, set, I forgot the exact set command, but, set admin password to something totally different, you probably don't want to apply that. But definitely the live community is where I've been recommending people go on and share that information. And, it's going to be one of the things that I'm working with our live community leadership to build out a little bit more of. Here's some recommended reports that you can run. That would be my number one recommendation around that, is just make sure you kind of read through what you're implementing. And as you saw in Derek's example, the set command for implementing that report that he had was, I want to say, about 6 lines long. So pretty easy to read through and make sure that it follows that set shared reports schema in regards to implementing that specific report. Will this capture clientless users as well? I assume that you're asking in regards to Derek's report. Derek, do you happen to know, does what the clientless users show up as in the user ID report?
I actually do not know how they show up on there, whether they show up, whether it's captured it there when you're doing the captive portal authenticating off the portal. But yeah, I can definitely get it together and we could send that out to you, David.
Okay, perfect. That'd be good. I am going to, I'm logging into my, excuse my noisy keyboard in the background. I'm logging into my PA220 that I have at home, which I have clientlessly logged in before. So I will find out for that one. I'll answer that one here shortly. All right, so we got another question here. If a customer has premium support now, they can use security assurance, or they have had to purchase premium support after November 1st, 2019. More specifically, if you have an active premium or platinum support contract right now. So security assurance was enabled on November 1st, 2019, but you didn't, if you had a premium support or platinum support contract prior to that date, it's just that functionality was then enabled within your support contract. So as long as you have an active premium or Platinum support contract, it is included as part of that support contract. So no need to repurchase that support contract again, unless it's expired. We're going to wait for some other questions to come in. While I do, I'm going to go ahead and pop around my monitor tab here and look at user ID. So I do see some logins here. So it's really interesting when I'm looking at my logins. My clientless logins do show logins, but the data source type is blank. Actually, data source type, and data source name are all blank. But that could also be because I have local authentication configured. But either way, yeah, I think Mr. Hatch, let us both, let Derek and I dig a little bit deeper into this and identify if the GlobalProtect agent shows as GlobalProtect, as we've shown, and then if clientless shows as anything different than the blank that I'm showing on my test system. Again, I just have it set up for getting back to my home network here real quick. So we can definitely lab that out and dive a little bit deeper into it. But I do show my clientless logins. Again, it just doesn't tie it back to the source type being clientless. See if there's any additional questions. If not, we'll hang out here for probably another 2 or 3 minutes. And if you have any questions, please feel free to pop those in. If not, we don't have any more, official content. So feel free to hop on off if you don't have any additional questions. Can the email gateway be an Outlook 365 SMTP server? Derek, do you remember what you had it configured as at your previous role? So I know you guys were Office 365s there.
Yeah, we had a internal or a hybrid setup. So we had a SMTP server internal that we connected to for that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it can be. I don't see any reason why it can't be, and I'm pretty sure we have customers that are configured that way. Ron, do you know if any of your customers are configured with the email gateway being Office 365 SMTP server?
It seems like a common profile you could set up. We can confirm that, but I would assume that you can do what Bruce wants to do, yeah.
Search here as well. Also, just to let everybody know, there is a new Palo Alto Networks Google Search Chrome plugin that was just released yesterday or today that enhances if you do a Google search for anything around Palo Alto Networks, it will enhance your search with a deeper search amongst all of our live community, and other resources that we have. So I do see I see actually a live community article here on how to create an Office 365 tie-in. So it looks like it is possible, but yeah, I definitely think it does concern itself around maybe the configurations and enablements that they have there. Do you need to run 9.0 plus code in order to take advantage of security assurance? No, you do not. So security assurance is enabled for any currently supported versions of PanOS. So that is PanOS 7.1 up until the end of June this year, and then PanOS 8.1, 9.0, and 9.1. So you can use security assurance on any of those currently four PanOS versions. All right, any other questions, folks? We'll give it about another minute. In that time, please feel free to send any questions you have in here. I'll just wrap up with some of the formalities. So this is a recorded webinar, so feel free to check out this recording when you get a chance. It will be on the live community at live.paloaltonetworks.com. It will also be on the Palo Alto Networks live community YouTube channel. That will actually happen first. It should pop up there next week. And then I will be sending a PDF version of this presentation here shortly after we get off this call. So thank you everybody for your time today. If you have no more questions, feel free to hop off. If so, feel free to ask them, but we're going to go ahead and wrap up here. And John, thank you so much for joining. Appreciate it. All right, David, good luck on creating those reports. Please feel free to create a live community login and share any cool reports that you might have. Keep an eye out for Derek, Ron, or myself providing some of those reports as well within the live community. Good luck. All right, everybody, going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks so much. Have a great one, and stay safe out there. Stay healthy. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, David, and the rest for a great webinar about GlobalProtect. We really appreciate you taking time to watch and hope you'll learn something today. As always, we welcome all questions and comments below. If you enjoyed watching this video, please give it a thumbs up and please subscribe to be notified of all of our new videos coming from the live community. Thanks again and have a great day.